to order the THPRD Board of Directors meeting for November 9th, 2022. Jessica, will you please take roll?
Lisa de Monteblanco.
Here.
Barbie Miner.
Here.
Alfredo Moreno.
Here.
Heidi Edwards.
Here.
Tia Ping.
Here.
Thank you. We have no action resulting from executive session. It is my understanding that we do not have audience time or audience feedback today. And so I think we're jumping right into board time. Doug is nodding. That's always a good sign. Do any of my peers have updates they'd like to share about things they've been working on? Alfredo.
I can lead off today. I just wanted to give a quick recap from my perspective of the ORPA conference I was able to attend over the weekend in Sun River. My first exposure, obviously, to an industry event. And yes, I felt like a huge interloper most of the time, but as I slowly started to piece together what a board member, a board director could do at an event that was staff and programmatically oriented, and dealing with the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day work and best practices. I think just had a great experience going to different events from agencies throughout the state, and even I was there, city of Philadelphia did an event, and just trying to extrapolate high-level things. For example, I went to a session on creating esports centers for teens, and as opposed to getting in the weeds of how many tables and pods we need to get into a room, it was more, okay, let's think about are we serving our teen populations in a way that that doesn't involve rec or art? Is there another, and so as I went on, that was a good takeaway, just trying to zoom myself out and get to the appropriate level of where I can have the right eyes and ears on these things. And then in closing, just wanted to thank all the staff who were there, who interacted with a lonely board director wandering around the halls. And I wanted to give a special shout out to Julie and Mark and Angel and Jared and Cynthia at the who just were very hospitable at the final event and just took time to ask me questions about being a board director. And some were very honest, saying, I've never interacted with a board director in my life. Like, why are you in this role? And so I thought it was just a great opportunity to kind of see what makes each other tick, and what we perceive our role to be, and what kind of work we're doing for the Parks and Rec and for the community that we serve. So mission accomplished is all that to say. So thanks.
I'm so glad you got to go. That's a fun one. And I'm glad you got to bond with staff and get to know other agencies. So appreciate you prioritizing that and making that happen. Other folks?
I'll jump in. I was traveling last time we met, so I'm sorry to miss our last board meeting. But since then, have had an opportunity to tour Cooper Mountain Nature Park with President Lynn Peterson, Felicita, our team, Doug and Bruce, and others from Metro. And Felicita, thank you for all of your leadership and coordination of all of these meetings with our electeds and folks that we really are, hoping to show how much we appreciate and what we need for the next steps of Cooper Mountain Nature Park in that area. So that was wonderful. Thank you for the invite to that. I also was or will be participating. We have I always mix up the meeting titles. We have a pension committee meeting next week. And then it looks like the last week of this month, we will have an audit committee meeting. So I'll be able to report out regarding both of those, pension and audit. And if my peers have any questions about either one of those, feel free to let me know. Happy to go to the team and ask questions on behalf of the group. That's it for me.
Thank you, Heidi. Barbie and Tia, I know you both went to the quarterly luncheon, so I know you have that to share.
Yeah, well, I was gonna save it for you. Yes, I attended the quarterly luncheon with the mayor, which Felicia and Lacey Beatty, Mayor Beatty, was kind enough and gracious enough to format everybody and invite everybody. And it was really great. We had a good turnout of state reps, advisory, TriMet advisory. We had a couple mayors there, so it was just a great turnout where we could talk about Parks and Rec and our positions and how we can work all together to solve problems and what things we can imagine and what things that we need to set on our priorities. So it was just a great overall discussion to increase those relationships and just keep the wheels turning of always moving forward and moving forward together, not just separately. We also had joint committee or this last month, so everybody got together and got to hear different updates from everyone. And there was a potential project that because we've created kind of a grant as part of our budget. We have this wonderful thing where we have a grant that our advisory committees, who are wonderful volunteers who have amazing ideas, can come up with different ideas that we can fund separate from our normal operations. And so they came up with I don't know if I think I can talk about this, but potentially doing or adding more I think it was quartz. Was it quartz? I think like disintegrated quartz and stuff to increase the at Greenway Park a bench and a sitting area near the basketball courts to make it more accessible and to have more sitting areas and just to hopefully make it more usable with how that area has a lot of water and flooding and stuff. So it was just really wonderful to see how our advisory committees can get together and that they're not just somebody who tells us something and nothing comes out of it, but that they can create these different little projects and then we can help support them to have them create their own ideas and bring that into fruition. So it was really nice to see that. And then what else? I think that's we had as a board, our retreat, and that was just wonderful to get to talk more about our values and how. And I think we created great ones. So I encourage everybody who's listening to go and read them because, and I think we'll finish finalizing them, and then we're moving forward, and it's all everything is wonderful into the new year.
Thank you, Tia. Barbie.
Well, I would pretty much echo. Thank you, Tia, for sharing. We were at the same event, so I won't bore everyone with repeating the same details. But I do think it's important to just flag and to thank you, Felicia, for your leadership and again continuing to drive these intergovernmental relationships and conversations. I think my big takeaway from the mayor's luncheon was again just hearing from folks how the visibility of our engagement and what is needed from us, and how important it is to make the ask and to invite and to keep those conversations going. And so I think to be in a room and collectively hear that as a takeaway of how can we elevate all of the work that we're doing at THPRD and how can we be seen as can continue to be seen, but also strengthen and deepen the relationship of our values and where we're showing up in the community and how we can be, again, that collaborative partner, I think for me was the biggest takeaway. And to just hear that from many different folks that, hey, is there a way that you can let us know what all is going on and what's on the docket? So when we hear this come up, we're thinking of you. And I think the only other piece that I will share is just so thrilled for our community and the voter support yesterday in the passing of the Beaverton School Bond, well, the levy. So very pleased to see that, as well as our Metro Parks levy. So thank you to the community and the voters for showing up. That's going to benefit all of our folks. So happy to see that. That's it.
Perfect. And a lovely segue into there was an election yesterday, and most of us have new state senators and or state reps. today, this week is a wonderful opportunity to reach out to them, welcome them into now having a leadership position within Washington County, within our Parks District. Encourage them to visit our wonderful parks. You can send them the Vision Action Plan. You can send them that registration opens on December 3rd. Just keep them in the loop and make sure you know them. So for me, that's Rep-elect Chaichi and Senator-elect Campos. So I'll be reaching out to them and making sure they know that we're up to really cool work. Cooper, like Heidi was saying, Cooper Mountain tours are going great. I want to give a very special shout out to our MVP, Bruce Barbarash, because our guests keep asking really specific questions. And if Bruce wasn't there, we would not have answers. So thank you so much to Bruce, who knows all about habitats and wildlife and climate change. And, what I don't have an expertise, I try to make up an enthusiasm, but really appreciate that Bruce is there with his expertise. So recently, Mayor Beatty, Chair Harrington, both had tours, which went great. Really wonderful opportunity to talk about the park. And then I met with Rep. Ken Helm earlier this week. He's actually never been to the park and we couldn't make our schedules work, but it is on my to-do list to make sure that he visits the park early next year. And it's actually been, not ideal in the rain, but it's been fine. Everybody's been a grown-up, so don't let the weather deter you. I had a lovely chat with Eileen Kravitz at the foundation about future work, future partnership, utilizing my connections. So I really appreciate the time and energy she took. And I out to all the board members. So I know everyone's busy. I know so much is being asked of you. And if you have 20 minutes to hop on the phone with her, I know your insight is really appreciated. And then the last thing, I know that we had, I think 12 enthusiastic budget committee applications. So we need to quickly check in about how we want to do that work. In the past, we've used a matrix, and then I think had 2 folks do interviews. But Doug, you want to help me out?
You bet. We had 12 great applications, so really a nice turnout. And correct, we use a little scoring matrix to kind of have an initial rundown from the board's perspective. We try to find a place where there's a gap in scoring and then launch on interviews. The trick on that is just 2 board members stepping forward to facilitate that. Then you'll have Jared and myself will help support the interview process. And then in essence, the subcommittee of the board would bring a recommendation to the full board. And again, we can use the next 5 or 6 weeks to process all that and launch, directed probably appointment in January would be appropriate.
So are you hoping from it just thumbs up from us that that's the approach we'd like to take?
You bet. Perfect.
Heidi, any concerns? No. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I know everyone's been hustling, board, staff, everyone associated with the district. So really appreciate everyone's hard work and labor and thoughtfulness. Next up, we have consent agenda.
I did, before we go to consent.
Sorry, what did I forget?
Well, it's board time, but I was going to say just one thing with regard to ORPA, and uniquely, it's about the board. Sat in a variety of sessions. We had several staff present, which was a lot of fun to be able to hear them. And Sabrina did a remarkable job at one session where the speaker, she was just to introduce the speaker, but the speaker did not show. So she managed it very well, just grabbed the subject and took the mic and filled the show. So that was well done. But this particular session, it happened to be Julie Rocha was presenting, and the subject area was gender inclusion. And about 3/4 of the way through the presentation, there was an individual who commented that, I'm from a smaller rural area, and there's no way our board would ever do this. How did you do this? And of course, she's asking Julie, and Julie had the appropriate responses, because we had a board that was willing to do this. And in the back of my mind, I had the same reaction that given time, you choose to either step in, and you all have done a wonderful job at really representing the community you serve.
Thank you for sharing, Doug. And it does sound like all the staff slayed at the conference, and I'm completely floored by Sabrina's skill set. I've never heard of that happening. So thank you for sharing, and great job, team. Okay, consent agenda.
I will make the motion. I move that the board approves the consent agenda as submitted.
This is Barbie. I'll second.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Tia Ping.
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes. Next up, we have unfinished business, and first up, an operations update.
You bet. We're going to have Jared launch us, and then Aisha will fill in afterwards.
Good evening, members of the board and those just happening to be listening in. I am Jared Isaacson, the finance director for the district. I'm here this evening to present the first quarter results for this fiscal year, along with the revised operating plan for the second quarter, which is on the next slide. The revenues for the revised operating plan haven't changed much, mainly due to the increase in cash on hand and that balance forward amount. Once we are able to really have a final number, we can put it in there and see how much we're actually going to have available as carry forward from the prior years. And as you see, it really makes up the difference where we have decreased our revenues for the revised operating plan in program revenues, as well as in other resources and grants. One item of note with the program resources, when comparing what we have collected to the revised revenue amounts, we're showing a 28% collection rate. And this is not, this is okay. You know, this isn't really great. When you compare it to the actual amount that we originally budgeted, it's only at about 22%. And for the second half of the summer, which is our busiest time of year, we would expect to see a higher percentage, as we'll see on the next slide when we compare this year's first quarter with the first quarter from 2019. But if Jessica wouldn't mind going back to the previous slide, I'm not quite done with that one. Also on the expenditure side, we've spent approximately 20% of the revised operating plan for our operations, and then our capital has spent about 4% of the revised operating plan. We have not needed to request a budgetary transfer from contingency funds that were set aside yet. However, we are monitoring several expense areas, including the effect of the compensation classification study implementation, the district's utilities, as we've seen the rates for those utilities go up, and other areas in the divisions. And now on the next slide, we will look at our current year first quarter in comparison to fiscal year 19. As you can see, the division expense is only at about 4% difference from this year to 2019, and capital outlay is right about the same spot as we were in 2019. But the big difference there is that program revenue. We had just over 35% of the budgeted amount received in the first quarter of 2019, and really we've only collected about 22%. Some of the factors that have led to this decreased amount being received is that we do have a decreased participation in some of the program activities. Some patrons are still hesitant about joining in-person activities. The district is also not able to offer as many classes due to a lack of instructors, such as is the case for swim lessons. As well as that we do have some facilities that are not open yet, and several of them are operating on limited hours. Otherwise, we're doing well as a district with staying within our revised operating plans. We just wish that our revenue collection was much higher than it really is. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Aisha for the rest of the operations update.
All right, thank you, Jared. So to start, great news on fall registration. We saw a significant increase from last fall to this fall. We are still a little bit below the historic information from prior to the pandemic, so 18% below what we experienced in fall 2019, but we are feeling very encouraged that things are moving in the right direction. On the next slide, I wanted to share some updates with you regarding our DEIA efforts. This past weekend, as was discussed earlier in the meeting, a number of us spent time in Sun River, Oregon at a conference for the Oregon Recreation and Park Association. And during that time, we were able to highlight our Spanish language map of our system. And that was a wonderful thing. There was a poster session that we were able to bring these maps, show all the information that had been carefully curated with our staff having relationships with organizations across the district of things that people would want to know about how to access our system. So it was wonderful to see that there in the poster session. We also did have a great week of welcoming week, just over a week, where we were able to perform our own events and, of course, hype up all the other events that were happening to welcome folks to our community. And then we also just wanted to also highlight the welcoming kits that we have been working on for our community. And that's been a great effort of both staff and our advisory committees. So next slide, please. We also have great stories to tell about the different events that have been held this fall. And here's a couple of images that you can see on the screen. But we've had Active Aging Week that we have participated in community organization. We've had walks and bike rides. We've had food-oriented events. We've had nature walks, and we've done so many of these in co-production with other community groups, which has just been a wonderful thing for us to be working on. On the next slide, we'll continue with a few more of our fall activities. There was the fall native plant sale where folks were able to pick up their plants that they had pre-ordered at the middle point of August. And so they were able to pick those up a few weeks back. We brought back the Health and Wellness Resource Fair. We are continuing our Fitness in the Park events. And one thing that is new to the district is the forest bathing concept. I actually got to meet someone at a chamber coffee event last week that is the instructor for that forest bathing class. And what's really exciting about that is that we're already receiving just tremendous feedback from the community on this new way to engage with nature and practice. So that was a great story to hear there. Moving into the next slide, we will talk a little about where we're at staffing wise, and this is not surprising information to the board. You've seen this information recently, but to share more widely with those that watch our meetings at home, we do want to point out that since that pandemic first started back in 2020, we have had 25% of our full-time positions turn over. So this is a result of both people leaving the organization, retiring from the organization, also taking new responsibilities through promotions with THPRD. So some of that is good news, but it does have an impact on what we're able to do. So that has been a keen focus of our HR department's efforts. We are also updating our classification and compensation structure. And the intent of that is to be competitive with the market. It's to ensure that we can be attractive to new employees, but also to ensure that payment and salaries are not an issue for our current employees. We want to keep those folks working with us. We also have had multiple looks at our part-time wage scale and have made adjustments there, again, to be competitive with the market. On the next slide, I'll shift gears to our facilities. And so the good news here is that the Harmon Swim Center has been open now for a little bit. And on Monday, we prepare to have a whole week of opening facility celebrations at the Aloha Swim Center. So both of those facilities were closed from March of 2020. So it's been really great to see people getting back. And based on what Sabrina has been reporting, we're getting more and more people every day at Harmon. And so it has been a beloved facility that people are excited to return to. We have also been wrapping up some of our projects that took on a lot of energy during the summer months. One of those is the Garden Home Recreation Center roof and ceiling repairs. So we're excited to welcome people back to the facility. They won't see too much of a difference on the inside of the building, but we've made some seismic and structural upgrades and repaired the roof that will help us keep that facility running along nicely into the future. On the next slide, and the next couple of slides, I wanted to share with you some of the work that's being done throughout our Park Services Division efforts. We have maintenance operations, and so roofs are an issue. The rainy season has begun. We're making sure that we patch any little holes and take care of regular maintenance so that we can make sure that those ceilings and roofs stay in place and protect our inside operations. We also are busy out doing landscape bed updates. We are spreading out the chips under our play equipment. We're doing things like edging our fields and making sure that those are ready to winter over. And of course, we're checking all of the systems within our buildings, HVAC, heating, plumbing, etc., just to make sure that we're ready for the winter. On the next slide, I'll share with you some updates from Nature and Trails. We have been doing lots of trailside maintenance. We are, and you can see in the lower left corner of this, we are trying to get craftier than the beavers, nature's engineers. It's not something we always win at, but we do try to do what we can. Crystal, one of our nature and trail specialists, is standing there on a beaver deceiver. And so there's a pipe running under her feet that tries to keep our beavers from stopping up all of the water flow, which results in flooding. So that's taking a lot of effort. Right now, we are ramping up our process to plant our container plants. We do a lot of bare root planting as well. It's a very busy time in Nature and Trails. So in addition to that, we handle any kind of storm downed trees, which you see in the lower right there. So next slide. We have some work in our planning and design and development groups. On the left side of the screen, you can see people enjoying the grand opening of Parivar Park, which is up in the North Bethany area. And then later tonight, you're going to hear a little bit about Abbey Creek concept planning. So that's the image on the right side of your screen. And so we're working on a lot of different planning efforts as well. So Downtown Parks and Open Space Framework Plan, that's our project in conjunction with Beaverton. That has been moving along, and we expect to be updating you on that in the next meeting or so. And then our own internal work is being completed on our comprehensive plan. We've gathered a bunch of information. This is us kind of memorializing the vision and talking about what we do for the next 20 years. So we're reaching the end of that. We hope to come back to you, I believe, in January and show you what we've come up with. And then shortly after that, we intend to bring back the strategic plan, which is a nearer term focus of the work we're going to do. All right, I think that concludes my presentation. So I'll pause here and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Aisha. Any questions? Quiet right now. All right. Next up, I think we have Abbey Creek.
We've got Tim, I think Tim and Renee will present this.
Thank you, Doug. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Tim Bonnen, the Interim Design and Development Manager. With me tonight is Renee Brucker, one of our park planners who will be presenting the preferred concept plan. Staff are requesting Board of Directors approval of the preferred concept plan for Abbey Creek Neighborhood Park Phase 2. The first phase of Abbey Creek Park was completed in November 2019 with a play structure, open lawn, and modest site furnishings to provide new homeowners with an open space to recreate and relax. Now we're advancing the park into the final phase of improvements led by 2 Ink Studio. With their assistance, an extensive public engagement process led to the creation of the preferred concept plan that builds upon the success of phase 1 and reflects today's conversations with the community. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Renee, who has done a great job managing the project. Renee?
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. Next slide, please. Here we have a vicinity map, and it's showing the location of the park in red. The circles represent walking distances within a half a mile to a mile radius of the neighborhood park. Next slide. The aerial map, and you can see that the site is surrounded by single-family housing to the north and the east. Most of the houses sit above the site looking into the park, and there is street parking on both Ernst Street and 170th Avenue on the south and the west sides of the property. Engagement slide, please. The first opportunity for public engagement began in spring of 2022 with a virtual meeting introduction of the park, the design team members, and the vision action plan. This was followed by a public survey asking community members about their preferences for future activities in the park. The responses were used to create 3 possible layout options for the park that were shared with the community at a family fun night event at the park, where over 700 community members attended. Staff gathered hundreds of comments from attendees about the preferences, and the results were captured in a preliminary concept plan that was presented at a virtual meeting recorded for later viewing. Each community engagement opportunity was promoted through multiple outlets, including the park webpage, postcard, postcard mailers, social media, the THPRD main page, and the events calendar, site signage, and the project's community email listserv and CPO7 meetings. The project webpage hosted bilingual information, 3 surveys, and YouTube presentations for those unable to attend. Our final community survey will be available in early December and will focus on elements to include in the toddler and teen areas. We had a great time at this engagement party, I tell you. The preferred concept slide, please. The feedback from the final public presentation overall was positive, and the preferred concept plan reflects the interests heard through the engagement process, such as an expanded play area, picnic shelter and gathering space, teen area, accessible pathways, open lawn, shade, and additional site furnishings. The concept plan preserves and builds upon the existing Phase 1 amenities while maximizing the use of the site. In the next series of slides, I'll go over the major design elements. In our workshop, shelter and shade were high on the list. The concept includes a picnic shelter centrally located to view the surrounding activities, numerous shade trees to provide a more natural feel to the site, and shade sails that would cover one or more of the amenity zones. We will pursue renting the shelter as well as opportunities to make them more flexible to meet programming needs, such as movable tables. There are some examples of covered areas. Next slide, please. More toddler play was also high on the list, and it is located away from the roads and near the shelter and existing play area. The elements for this area will be determined following the survey in November. Some ideas for the play is shown on the right side there. Next slide, please. Play for everyone is a goal for the district and for the neighborhood. Teenagers at the event indicated that a gathering space with multiple and flexible uses would be great. The teen area is the district's first, and the community will have the opportunity to help determine the elements of this area in the upcoming survey. Next slide, please. Open field. The open field space will allow for passive recreation, including non-program play, picnics, or family events. The hard surface walking paths are accessible for all and were also a desire of the community. The loop paths, the open field, excuse me, the path loops the open field and meanders through the higher active areas with 2 access points from 170th and one from the neighborhood to the north. And finally, our last park element is the addition of more native plantings and trees for shade that would transform the feel of the site and allow for walks through canopy cover and areas of plantings. There is a wet area that would be controlled in a planted swale near the loop path and play areas. That's my last one. Thank you very much. Now turn the presentation over to Tim.
Thank you, Renee. One more slide, please. As described in your board memo, the estimated project cost for the preferred concept plan exceeds the project budget and may require additional funds to complete the project. Staff submitted a grant application on October 31st to the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant program to cover the budget shortfall. The preferred concept plan reflects the conversations with the community and fulfills the district's goal to deliver a new neighborhood park in an underserved area. As mentioned, staff is requesting Board of Directors approval for the preferred concept plan for the Abbey Creek Neighborhood Park Phase 2. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Tim and Renee. This is exciting. Shade. You know what we like. Tia.
We can't hear you, Tia.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Is the existing play structure stay or does that get removed?
It's still there in that gray area with the number 1.
Oh, okay, and that's the is it serving currently like elementary school kid range? Because I know you said the new 11 is toddler playground. Is it I'm assuming it's big kid play.
What is existing now is more of a 5 to 12 structure.
Okay, perfect.
And then there's some swings that are multi-aged and a spinner that could be used multi-aged as well.
I love it. And then is part of the, as we pick or as we give out the options and the surveys, is there always options for people facing disabilities as far as like for that toddler section that's going to be created, or like even the teen section I saw, like the grass parent, like will that be easily accessible by wheelchair and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, at this time we're planning on all of the activities will be accessible, ADA accessible, per codes, and surfacing for the teen area would be a hard surface, and the play for toddlers would be probably a turf, or we're going to work with maintenance and determining surfacing for that, but it will be accessible.
Okay, great. That's all I had.
Yep.
It's perfect.
I think everyone just loves it. I think it's wonderful. No, this is beautifully designed and there's so many elements to it. What a treat to have in a neighborhood. So thank you for all your hard work. And yes, Alfredo.
Just wanted to thank you all for incorporating the teen zone in there. I was just kind of curious, do we have other park facilities that have anything similar, or would this be kind of new for us, or I'm just wondering what the background would be?
This would be new for us, and I'd love to talk to you about what you've learned at ORPA. So give a call anytime.
Sure.
we can chat. Yeah, we're gonna
go
have.
ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, so this is new. We're trying to get some ideas for what the possibilities could be there. We'd like to have some active amenities and then some cool kind of hangout zones. So we heard different things from the teens that came up to us at the community event, and I think that we're going to be able to satisfy some of their desires.
Well, I'm really curious to see how it comes out. I mean, I think it's exciting to have these options and to see what the response is. I mean, I think had you not provided anything like that, I know we have some parks where, you know, there's folks kind of not age appropriate who hang out on the playground facility anyway because there's nowhere else for them to, you know, to be. So don't always fault them for that. But as a parent with young kids, it's you know, it's an awkward situation. So I think this kind of clearly, you know, delineating a place that is not really for toddlers to hang out at, or you know, 7-year-olds, you know, necessarily, just to have a place to relax and lounge with friends. You know, I think that's an exciting development. So, job well done.
Thanks, Alfredo. Heidi?
Yeah, this is great. And we have some teens who can be guinea pigs for you if you need on the board here. You need some more teen input. There's a few of us that have some teens that would, I'm sure, gladly give some opinions. So yeah, that's very exciting. And I do love the older age recreational, because I fit into that, you know, all ages kind of thing. You know, adult play is great too. So spin me around. If there's anything else, if there's not anything else, I was going to make a motion, unless my peers have anything else to add. All right. Okay. I would like to move that the Board of Directors approve the preferred concept plan for Abbey Creek Neighborhood Park Phase 2.
This is Alfredo. I'll second.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Felisa de Monteblanco.
Yes. We are moving right along. Thank you, Tim and Tim and Renee.
Thank you.
And we'll jump right into THPRD values and priorities. And I know Holly's been working on this, so thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Holly Thompson. I am your communications director, and I'm here this evening with a very easy assignment, because you all did the hard work at your retreat when you discussed the values and priorities for the district for the upcoming fiscal year. And so we had a little bit of editing to do, a little bit of sharpening our pencil, but on behalf of Doug and the rest of the management team, I just want to express our collective gratitude, because you truly made it easy and you gave us great direction. As we reflected on the comments, we really liked the additions that you asked for. And so instead of reading the document to you, I know you've got it out there. What I thought I would do is walk through for the public as well, what our values, our priorities are, and just focus on how we addressed the comments that you had for us at the retreat. So on the next slide, we'll begin with our values. And just as a refresher, remember, we look at our values every year. These are district values, meaning that they begin with the board of directors, but they filter down through all of us, wherever we work at the district. And we really look at these as guiding principles to embody the work that we do every day. So the values really guide our policy making as well as the daily direction of our work. We see the values as enduring. They're not something that we expect to change year to year. And we limit ourselves to 3, which is really hard, but you do the hard work of really helping us understand what our foundational values are. So on the next slide, we'll look at our first value, which is leading with equity, with a special attention to racial equity. I'd like to note that the board was very comfortable continuing this value. There were no edits suggested. This was unchanged from the previous year. Some important things to highlight is that here at THPRD, we value all dimensions of equity. So even though we want to have special attention on racial equity, just as your discussion, you've modeled the way for us with your conversation on the Abbey Creek plan. You've embodied how important it is to look at all dimensions of equity and make sure that we're planning and caring for our whole community, and that it is essential core value for us. We also use this value as a tool to prioritize our investments throughout the district, and we continue to see the need for a special attention to racial equity due to the disparate outcomes in our community. On the next slide, we'll look at our second value, which is environmental stewardship. We did receive feedback from the board, and we did our best to edit the statement, and we feel like we captured the essence of what we heard from you at the retreat. What you asked for was more active language. The statement as presented by staff was a little too passive, and we loved that the board wanted to show a more concrete commitment to environmental stewardship, and in your own words, to hold ourselves accountable. So you'll see that we've added language in there about our commitment and to hold ourselves to account, to make sure that we're monitoring, that we're measuring, and that we're paying attention to our progress. You also asked for an action statement showing our demonstration to reducing our carbon footprint and addressing climate change, to being an ally in the effort. You also asked us to highlight that we have a responsibility to be part of environmental education as stewards of so much land and with so many amazing programming opportunities. We have a great capacity, and we do have a great history of rich environmental education, and that was an important thing to point out, as well as honoring our commitment to future generations. So we took good notes, and we did our best to capture the elements that you felt were missing in that value. The next value that we looked at was our commitment to community vision. This is again a continuation of the value that we've had for the last year or so, but you also had feedback to edit this value, which we thought was really on point. First and foremost, we clarified in our language that the visioning process, it was our foundation for public involvement, right? We did this really intentional, really broad outreach effort. We were honored and recognized by the International Association for Public Participation in the United States as having the best public involvement project of the year. And we were specifically honored for our diversity and inclusion. But we're not done. It just sets the foundation that we have a good baseline information. We clarified that the visioning is a tool that we need to integrate into our planning and our operational work, and we affirmed our commitment to ongoing community engagement with an emphasis on reaching underserved and historically marginalized voices. So it's not enough to go where people are. It's not enough to create space for people to be involved. We also need to take the active step of finding folks that aren't participating, breaking down those barriers and bringing them to the park to give us the advice that we need. And I think the last presentation on Abbey Creek really embodies, right? Shows how we just really in the Bethany area blew the door off the previous outreach efforts that we've had and have gotten great feedback in that process. So visioning was the start. It is not the end. It was not the destination. It's part of a journey and a commitment to our public involvement. Now that we've finished values, we'll take a minute and look at our priorities. On the next slide, we affirm that every year we look at what our top 3 priorities are for the district. Again, I'm going to start with actually the bottom point. We limited ourselves to 3, and that is always a very difficult and challenging process to pick just 3. We make sure that we have information communicated to our staff while these are our top 3 priorities for the year. Those priorities are selected based on the needs and the unique circumstances of each year. They're likely to fluctuate annually, and they will fluctuate more than our values. But these priorities are used to give direction for staff in developing the annual budget process, which is why we see those as being more likely to move around a little bit, because year to year, the priorities for funding can look different as circumstances change. And on the next slide, we'll see our priority for this year. It continues to be to invest in our employees and technology. This is unchanged from last year and really speaks to the state of the district. As you've heard in presentations tonight, staffing and retention are really big issues right now. We need to attract talent, we need to retain talent, and we need to do our best to keep people active and engaged employees at THPRD so we can expand our programming options. We also know that we've had technology debt at the district, and we have to make a sustained financial commitment to address that technology debt, which you are doing through our financial system change process that we are in the midst of. And on the horizon, we're looking to the future and thinking of website and registration system replacements. So technology is going to be something we're going to be talking about a lot in years to come. On the next slide, we'll see the second priority for the year, which you all had so much feedback on, and we really appreciated it. So as presented, we continued staff's first draft, talked about strengthening programming opportunities. It was still really rooted, I think, in the perspective of where we were at in the beginning of the pandemic era. And the board collectively, you gave us feedback and said it's time to update this priority. You wanted us to acknowledge that the pandemic has been a process and we've moved forward through that process and we're at a different place. You wanted us to acknowledge the challenges that we continue to have both with staffing and with participation levels. The importance of breaking down barriers to participation and the importance of, as we continue to strengthen our programming opportunities, that we prioritize free programming and that we prioritize access and co-production for marginalized communities, which is why you'll see both particularly in our events side, why we're working so strongly on co-production and really trying to change the model of how we do events and working much more closely with community-based organizations on partnering on events like the Dia de los Muertos event we had at Conestoga this past weekend. Our final priority for the year is a new priority for this year, and it really speaks to developing, sustaining, operating, and financial models for the future. And so the previous one, a priority that we had last year, was very planning focused. It really talked about kind of our long-term planning perspective and had a lot of actionable things in there that were already underway. We felt, and the board agreed, it was important this year to really focus our priority to be thinking about financial modeling and creating sustainable long-term revenue streams for the district. So we really reframed it for that financial perspective. We wanted to acknowledge the reality that the pandemic has caused financially for the district, and we wanted to continue to explore long-term, sustainable, enduring funding options that we haven't necessarily pursued before. It's time to find some new opportunities. So with that, I think that is, oh, I have one more slide. At the end of the retreat, we talked about the parking lot. And there was some discussion with the board because, as you know, we use the parking lot as a tool to put good ideas that are future focused, that the board collectively comes to a majority agreement that they would like to see staff pursue. And so one of the things that, as we have used this parking lot concept for a couple of years now, we've had some items on the parking lot that are beyond just THPRD's ability to achieve. So these are things that take funding from other sources than just THPRD. They take partnership opportunities with other agencies or the business community. And instead of talking about those specifics, what I wanted to focus on was process, because the board had a question about how will we manage things on the parking lot that aren't able to move forward. And, you know, if I could borrow from Tia, there was a comment about we don't want those things to get lost, right? And so staff really put on our thinking caps and really thought about that feedback. And we had two reactions. First and foremost, please know your staff listen. So we assure you, when we know things are really important and they're priorities, and we still have work to do to find more support out in the community, even if we aren't able to get traction right away, we promise you that we're always listening and that we never forget what's important to you. However, it is a good idea to have a tool to manage that. So What we suggested is moving some of those items that have sat in the parking lot but are waiting for more community support, more partner support, moving those into the general manager work plan. That is something that the board looks at annually on a regular basis with the general manager. And it's a nesting place where we can put those good ideas that aren't actionable this year in the parking lot, but that we want to make sure don't get lost in the shuffle and stay in a high awareness category and discuss opportunity between the general manager and the board of directors. So our proposal was to add an element to the general manager work plan where you would see those parking lot items. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. If you've got really hard ones, Doug's ready to take those too. But the floor is yours to let us know if we got it right on updating the values and priorities for the district.
Thank you so much, Holly. Heidi?
Yeah, thank you. And I love the idea of moving those items from the parking lot, if they've been there for a period of time, into the general manager's report, just somewhere that it can be kept and held, and knowing that y'all listen. I think my biggest concern is if there's change to the board or change to, who's filling the seat of our general manager, just making sure that that's all reflected. So thank you. I think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Heidi.
But Doug's never leaving. So.
I think we're pretty happy because you did all the changes we asked for. Appreciate your writing abilities, Holly, and appreciate that staff are so receptive to sometimes our big ideas, and appreciate that there's a place for ideas that won't get lost anymore. So thank you.
You're most welcome.
I think we will entertain a motion.
Excellent. This is Barbie, and I move that the board of directors approve the board values and for fiscal year 23-24 budget priorities.
This is Tia. I will second.
Jessica?
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Tia Payne,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes. Thank you, Jessica. Last up, we have our legislative platform. I imagine Kylie is back, and take it away, Aisha and Kylie.
Do that.
Good evening. Yes, we do have Kylie here, and she is going to run us through a variety of slides. You should have received in your packet and the information about our draft platform. So we're here to share where we think we are and solicit your feedback. So I will turn it over to Kylie.
Wonderful, thank you. We can go to the next slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over kind of what the long session is because we did a very deep dive last time, but I just thought I'd do a couple reminders that it can last up to 160 days. You see that it starts on January 17th this year, and so I think officially it has to be done by June 25th is the constitutionally required 90 day, but there's always hope that they can get done before that. So I like to leave that a question mark. And just a quick reminder, this is the session where we approve the 2-year state budgets for all the different agencies for the upcoming biennium. That's the big piece of work that has to get done. But there is no shortage of other work because there are no bill limits or anything along those lines. So there's routinely been more than 3,000 bills introduced. A very few percentage of those actually pass and become legislation, but there is a lot of material to review because we go through each and every single bill to see if it's of interest, of impact. Is it something that THPRD needs to have on their radar? And I also was going to note just really quick, I'm sure that everybody's been paying attention to the news, and we had a slightly big day yesterday where we were, something a constitutional duty we were supposed to do. So I just wanted to make a couple notes. I'm sending out an election recap coming up here probably later tonight. Wanted to wait until we had a little bit more surety about some of the various races and things that weren't necessarily called last night or this morning. But I will note, like they've said nationally, that Oregon did not experience this very large red wave that they had predicted. There was an expectation that our state Senate could be split evenly and that our House members could almost be split. That didn't take place. The D's lost a few seats in both chambers, but not as many as had been predicted a couple months ago. So we followed the national trend around that. And then the other piece that I would note really briefly for you is that with this new governor, we know Governor Kotek, but before that, regardless of who the new governor was going to be, this was really going to be the first time we've seen a significant transition point in more than a decade after governor, because from Governor Kitzhaber to Governor Brown, a lot of the same policies, a lot of the same ways in which they operated, governance structures, how their advocacy missions, a lot of those was very much the same. And the last time we really kind of saw a transition and a separation in that leadership was from Governor Kulongoski to Governor Kitzhaber. So I was speaking to a couple of different legislators over the last couple of days, and they all noted like this will be the first time, and for a lot of people, a significant difference in how they're used to operating, because she might choose to keep things the way they've been, but there's also lots of different decision points that she gets to make coming into the governor seat. So a little bit of extra kind of perhaps new things to encounter in addition to all the new legislators and all those different things that we know are shifting and changing, and new legislative districts as well that we discussed last time. So I just want to give you a little bit of a preface into what we are going to hopefully be walking into when we go to session next month after next. So next slide. Okay, so a reminder, I think most of you have had walked through a platform before with me. So that's what we're doing tonight. And just a reminder, these just guide the advocacy efforts that I do on behalf and work with Aisha and Doug on in the building for you. They're helpful if I get asked a question or if we're asked, there's a conversation going. These really help me know like what are the priorities of the board of directors in the district that I need to kind of keep at the top of my list when I think about the district and what might be of importance to them. Not everything, but it really helps me kind of keep things focused and know like, oh yes, this is probably a direction they want to know about, and make sure that I can monitor and keep track of that. And we talked about last time that the focus of the legislative platform is really about our unique position. We are the largest special district, special parks district in the state. So there's a lot of things that we may have some unique expertise, thoughts, ways in which we can impact or be impacted by. So we'll take that into consideration. Our organizational values that I think I probably missed a really great conversation that just happened, I think, about that. So I apologize that I wasn't here for that, and I'll have to be educated on those pieces. Also shared constituencies and complementary services, all kinds of things we discussed at the end of my last talk with the board, I think last month. So those are some of the thoughts we take into consideration when coming up with this platform and our policy positions, and then that just kind of general guide for me as we move forward. Oh, and also I'd say they're not meant to be all inclusive either. There's going to be bills that come up that don't necessarily fall in any of these policy positions or in any of these buckets, but we know will impact the district, and we keep track of those and monitor those as well, and determine how best to interact with them as we move forward. So I think that's it for the slide. So this is the first on our platform, local agency control and authority. I'm not going to read it because I know you have it in front of you, and this one is the same as what we've had actually the last couple sessions. And it really just helps guide and clarify as I see bills that come through about your kind of operations and those kinds of things that might impact that. And something I really appreciate Doug's guidance on a lot of the time. So love that, and Aisha as well. I go to you two a lot on this one. All right, what's this? What are we talking about? So that's the first one, and not a new one, something we're all familiar with that you've seen and been part of the platform for the last couple sessions. So we can go to the second one. This one's a little bit meatier. We've had this on our platform for several sessions now, and I think you may have all gotten some material. Was there an SD? No?
Nope, we are finalizing that and getting that to the board
Cool.
probably
Great.
tomorrow. Yep.
Great. I will give a very brief recap of it, so you have a little bit of know what's coming your way, and happy to answer more questions later on. So SDCs have been something that have been on our radar for several years now. In the 2021 session, there was a bill that was the result of a work group that had happened in the months before that session. THPRD was active in that work group through Janine Rustad. She sat at the table as one of the representatives of a special parks district. And it was really, there was a lot of data and information shared. There had been a hope to have some sort of legislation by some of the different stakeholders about SDCs, but it became really apparent through the conversations that there's a lot there to know and understand, and to understand the impacts of SDCs, and to talk about how the state deals with infrastructure, who pays, how you pay, what kind of infrastructure we're talking about. So instead of having some bill that could have actually impacted what kind of SDCs are collected, when, where, how, it instead was primarily about a study that would happen over after session was done during the interim months. That study was actually just completed. A public review draft was shared, I think, on October 18th through a webinar. Several THPRD folks watched that in addition to myself. It is a very long document. I think it's just under 200 pages. It represents a lot of work, has a lot of good information in there. But there are some things that it doesn't quite do when we review the bill that authorized the study. It doesn't quite meet some of the components in our view. And they did offer a feedback form for folks who had sat the webinar, who participated in some of the stakeholder sessions that they had to get together input as they came up, as they developed the study. I worked to provide a recap of that study because it is a lot. There is a wonderful executive summary at the beginning of those 200 pages that has a lot of the key threads. I would really focus your attention there first, because a lot of the key themes are in there. But we did offer feedback on behalf of THPRD because there is a lot of conversation about SDCs and what they do and what they pay for and how. And then how can we make housing more affordable in our neighborhoods? And so our point was that the way in which the report is structured kind of makes, unintentionally probably, but an either or, that you can choose SDCs or you can choose to have housing affordability, but you can't have both. Well, that doesn't seem fair or right. We need to have a way to pay for infrastructure, to pay for parks, to pay for all those different things, and also make sure we have affordable housing out there, little a, affordable. So that was our primary point. There's a couple other things we note in there as well. And so we submitted those comments by the deadline. ORPA, the Oregon Recreation and Parks Association that THPRD belongs to, also submitted comments. And then the League of Oregon Cities, the Association of Oregon Counties, Special Districts Association, and then ORPA again submitted a letter that they did all jointly. Like, here are some of the great things about this report, but also here are some of the things we don't think it fleshes out as much as it could or should when we talk about the relationships between these two things. I think those are all can be made available to you and something that we can talk about more. But this is a long introduction to say that we expect to see some legislation around system development charges. What that looks like, we don't know. But based on some of the things that are in the report, like the fact that it notes that parks SDCs are among some of the larger ones, and that's driven by the cost of land acquisition. Not all the other SDCs have to pay for that kind of item. So there is a concern that parks might be a target for any legislation that's focused on removing, altering, impacting system development charges in the effort to reduce the price of homes. So we're monitoring that really carefully. We are, there's a coalition of the local government entities that are meeting regularly to talk about this. And we're really focusing on education of both current members, but also the new members, because a lot of them have missed out or aren't going to be as aware of those public hearings and the information that was already shared in some of those meetings we've had over the past 2, 3, 4 years. So that's our number one. And then also, as things start to crystallize, we know better what we're going to be looking at. We are also working on some materials around really what parks and recreation and green spaces do and offer to our community members, especially when we think about the fact that we're really focusing on middle housing and densifying housing. That now more than ever, we need to make sure that everyone has access to those playgrounds, to those parks, to greenery, and what that means for everything from climate change to mental health to physical health. So really focusing on those pieces. So as we prepare for session, those are some of the things that we're working with partners and other folks to have ready for whatever we see coming. We don't know, like I said, yet what that is, but we want to be ready to be part of those conversations and to be thoughtful and to offer our understanding of how SDCs work and ways in which we can be good partners there. So I will also, as in any presentation I ever do, please stop and ask questions as we go along if necessary. Okay. Next slide. So this also, the last one's an old one, but lots of the information. This one is the newer portion of our platform and really focused on climate adaptation and community resiliency. So this is something that has been shared with me that the board is really focused on and is a priority, is about how we can do better and do more and focus on some of the different things in this space. And so one of the things, for example, that might fall under this that we're working on is how can we help really ensure or help secure some funding for THPRD and other parks districts around climate adaptation and mitigation work. Like, where can that come from? We don't have a steady stream or something available to us necessarily to do some of those really critical projects that would help as the state is really leaning into lowering our emissions and really thinking about how do we mitigate some of those changes from climate change, especially in more urban areas when we're talking about tree canopy and those kinds of things. Where and how do we do that? So we're looking at things like the local government grant program. How can we make so these kinds of programs and efforts and projects would be more eligible in that process? So we don't have a bill on that or anything, but we are watching and seeing where, either through some of the agency budgets, through some of the funding asks, or if there are bills out there that deal with climate change, how can I use this priority and policy platform to help engage in those conversations and see what we can do for THPRD and other parks districts. So next slide. This one's always on our platform list, as it should be. How do we make sure to state funding for parks and rec and trails through the various things that are listed on there? And so that's something that I'm always monitoring, looking, working, thinking about through the agency at the state level, also working with our partners at ORPA, because this is something we can all kind of secure and work together around how do we make this the most that it can be for parks districts. So next slide. So, and this is the other new one that we've added, is to add social equity efforts. And so there's a lot of writing on there, but we really I've been acknowledging kind of as my conversations with the board and when we've met in different things, the focus on this being, you know, where one of the key focuses of the board. How do we engage in those things that help our community members and look at equity and the social needs of our facilities and who are in our neighborhoods? And so this is where, like, when we thought about childcare and we engage in some of those childcare conversations and help support some of those bills, we also expressed some concerns about different funding for different preschool things and how those had been developed and what the thoughts were behind those. So I wanted something in the platform, and this language can be massaged. It's really just there for you and your thoughts and your feedback to me about what kind of guidance I can have as I look at different things that might intersect with your priorities, your values, and be able to include those in what we're looking at and how we want to engage with different pieces of legislation. So I think that's our last one. And I will say that I talked really fast because I ran home because I was at I don't know if I should share with you, but I had my daughter's cross country banquet tonight. She's a senior, so I had to do it. And then I ran home really fast to make sure that I got here in time. So I did my own little bit of cross country. I think I got my personal best tonight. So I hope I didn't talk too fast. And please ask questions. I'm happy to go back through things. I haven't been able to look at the most updated election stuff, but if you want to ask me questions about that, helpful, I'm happy to talk about whatever would be helpful. I see a hand.
Thank you, Kylie. I appreciate you coming. I'm really glad you got to go to your daughter's event and be here. That's really generous of you. Thank you. And what was I going to say? This is all really helpful. I think because I live and breathe this stuff too. I do. I mean, when I think about what's going to happen next year, Doug's lights keep going off. It is too funny. Yeah. I think SDCs is just a really easy thing for people to point at as the problem. And our role, like you said, is going to be education. And I mean, I can see myself and how much I've grown to understand SDCs. And I mean, I think if you had had this conversation with me 6 years ago, like I would have said something really different, but I've gotten to learn and understand like how critical these dollars are for the thing the community says they want, right? So thank you for all this, and I'm a little stressed about next year, but I think we're ready.
Note that one of the findings, or one of the things that the report did find, and one of the things that we highlighted that it notes is there is no other viable alternative for almost any of this infrastructure. And it kind of did go through a little bit of history about why we're at where we're at when we talk about funding infrastructure. I mean, if there was another source, if the state wanted to create a pool of funding to help us get through this, we definitely could look that way too. And there's also some of the feedback that was given either in our letter or perhaps ORPA's or the association letter that talked about there's not enough analysis of the other cost drivers. So you've looked into this one cost driver that represents 2 and 13% of the development costs, but there's a whole lot of other ones. And so if we're really serious about looking at how do we reduce the price of housing, we should be looking at kind of at all of it and seeing, because there's, of all the different pieces, there's one part of this that we're not making money off of this. We're providing these services. So that's what I'm a little stressed about too, but there's a whole big group of us that are working together and kind of already being strategic and thinking about who are the kind of already doing a lobbying effort around which legislators do we need to talk with, how are we going to do this, who needs let's kind of triage the education piece of this, and making sure that whatever kind of things we look at, we do it with a sound education about if you choose to do XYZ, how will that impact your neighborhood, which is especially helpful because every legislator has a park in their district.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you, and I appreciate something I shared earlier with folks is that everyone probably has at least one new legislator, considering all the change, considering all the redistricting. So, it's never too early to reach out to folks and build that relationship, and that they are now representing a great parks district. Tia?
I just wanted to clarify the SDC sheet that's going to get sent out. Is that all the information of what we should, like talking points and stuff? Is that, I missed that?
No, we're
Okay.
not.
No,
we're not. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Aisha.
Well, no, it is intended to be kind of the 4-page summary of the 200-page document.
Gotcha.
So yes, we can get to talking points and we can work on that next. But we wanted you to have that boiled down version. And so Kylie's worked very closely with the other agencies, as she mentioned, ORPA, SDAO, AOC, LOC. But she has also worked closely with our staff, Gary Keck and Peter Swinton, to kind of boil down the information specifically for all of you. We have a couple of tiny tweaks to make, and we can get that out to you tomorrow.
Yeah, and if I know staff doesn't have a lot of time, but I mean, this is great talking points already, and I'll take this because I've purposely, we're outreaching to develop relationships for Cooper Mountain and meeting people and showing them how great Cooper Mountain is and the potential of expanding that space. And so I've purposely reserved the new state electeds, senators and reps, because one, they were having an election, so I didn't want to bother them. And two, I figured this kind of lull before the start. And after they win would be a really good time to start talking. So having all these talking points, if possible, would be really good about all the major THPRD things we would want to introduce them to as we get to know them.
Yeah, and I think something that Kylie and I had also talked about was developing some maps of each of these new congressional districts and showing the highlighting of THPRD facilities within those spaces, because those could be additional talking points or opportunities to invite out for a tour as well. So
yeah,
we can get that to you.
Great.
Yeah. Aisha and I'll work with you too to make sure that we do have a couple of general talking points, because they're saying we're not there yet on the actual the specifics of what legislation, but you're absolutely right that in these developing relationships, just to be able to say this is on our radar, this is one of the things we're thinking we'll be talking about, and just a couple lines, and we can absolutely look to include something like that. Let's keep those.
Well, and I think in another item that we would want to include too is that we've already been doing things that we think are the solutions, part of the solution towards this issue. And so talking about the different waivers that we offer, talking about the credit arrangements we work out with developers, those are all great things that could become tools that other communities may use. But this is kind of a specific thing for each community. What each community defines as their needs is different, and so there wasn't necessarily a one size fits all fix that was defined by this study.
Yeah, and that was another one of the key points too, is that you can just tell by looking at the different communities and how they handle it and what kind of development they're actually experiencing, how that really impacts all the different parts of SDCs, and that needs to be taken into consideration as well.
I was going to say that I know you missed the values conversation, but the good news is that it's a lot of the same stuff because it's the same board and we just get smarter and more thoughtful. So I don't think anything will surprise you in our values, and I think they lend themselves very nicely to this. So I love this, and I think this goes exactly with what our priorities are and what the conversations are going to be in the legislature next year. So if any, I don't know if folks want to give like a thumbs up or ask any last minute questions so we can, so staff can develop these materials and make sure that we're ready to go. Okay. Everyone seems happy. Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you so much.
With that, I think we're done with a regular meeting. And so I will close this meeting. I hope staff have a lovely evening, and we will reconvene in executive session.
And I think Doug, Christine, or was it you, Felicia? Somebody was supposed to text Christine to hop back on.
I think she popped back on. So if you can utilize your 5:30 invite, that'll do the trick.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.